Welcome, everyone. Hi, I am so grateful that you're here. Thank you. My name is Allison Rivers Sampson, and my honors project concerns empowering high schoolers and increasing school connectedness through peer mentorship. The context of this project is an early college high school in a rural Northern California community with elements of both liberal and conservative politics. Set on the campus of a community college, the high school's mission is to provide a supportive and rigorous learning community that makes higher education more accessible to a diverse population that's reflective of the region's demographics. The program serves historically disadvantaged students, including those who come from families with low income, first-generation college students, and English learners, and also other high schoolers for whom a smooth transition into post-secondary education can be challenged. The county's population is almost 93% white, while over 63% of the students at this high school identify as white. So notice that difference between those two numbers. Therefore, the school has 24% more ethnic diversity than the county. An even greater diversity in the school appears in its high numbers of students who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community. Almost 40% of students identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, something else, not sure, or decline to respond. When asked about gender, over 11% identify as transgender, unsure, or decline to respond. Here's something really interesting. Of the students who were ninth graders in 2022, only 77% specified, no, I am not transgender, whereas 92 to 93% of 10th, 11th, and 12th graders selected this option. Over 59% of the total population of students report having negative mental health. This parallels a February 2023 Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, report exposing a national youth mental health crisis. CDC states that young people are experiencing levels of distress that call for action, and advises that schools have a unique ability to help students thrive and can offer a critical lifeline for students by having the right programs and services in place. CDC specified that 60% or 3 in 5 teen girls and 75% or 3 in 4 teens who identify as LGBTQ+ are encountering extremely high levels of mental distress, violence, and substance abuse. These are disturbingly high numbers. We really need to be paying attention to this. Qualitative methodology allowed the emergence of categories and themes for the literature review. I examined issues of rurality, school social work, school climate, group interventions, using qualitative research and grounded theory analysis, as well as other themes that were significant for this community. Don't worry, I'll explain what those are. At the outset, it's essential to acknowledge that there's significant overlap of the categories that emerged during analysis. This is expected in a holistic overview of a single setting. 3 primary categories that emerged as experienced by these students were related to academic stress, mental health, and school community. There was a marked interconnection of the categories, including the effects of school climate on mental health and social connectedness, and exacerbated effects on mental health from academic stress in the early college high school setting. Also underscored was the impact of academic stress on the school's community. Within each of these categories were multiple themes of concern. In the category of academic stress, themes of early college high school model itself with its concurrent heavy workload. Within mental health, specific effects development has on teen mental health, and factors affecting persons in the LGBTQ+ community. Although mental health concerns did exist prior to the pandemic, they were exacerbated by the quarantine. Finally, in the school community category, themes of school climate, social connectedness, peer leadership, and the considerable power administrators, teachers, and staff have to impact the school culture and students' individual and collective experiences. During the iterative process of analysis using qualitative methodology, the categories and themes emerged. While I was coding, I had multiple conversations with students, including one that was especially fortuitous. As he described the current peer mentoring program at the school, it became clear that several of the identified needs could be met by revising the current framework. Working together with students and staff, I reviewed and revised the school's existing program. The focus was to modify the components that weren't working, reinforce those that are, and amend practices that can bolster social connectedness and positive school culture development for their ability to improve many of the difficulties raised by students and reiterated in the literature and the CDC's urging for schools to take action. Prioritizing student voice aligns with this school's and the new school board's focus on listening to and valuing students. By proactively addressing issues rather than reacting to crises, it's possible to reduce stigma and create a culture of open communication and support built around these common concerns. The emergent data and literature review validate peer leadership and group intervention. One power of groups is that they tap into our social nature. When a person hears elements of their own story spoken by someone else with a similar experience, it's possible to realize that the struggle shared is a human thing, not a you thing. The existing peer mentor program focused mostly on academics and transitioning from middle school, though the students stated it wasn't as effective as they'd like. The primary issue was a self-reinforcing loop in which mentors weren't sure how to get mentees to talk, and mentees thought mentors weren't coming to meetings prepared, and the mentees also didn't know how to ask mentors for help. It was identified that training was needed on both sides for mentors to know how to elicit conversation and for mentees to know what kinds of things mentors could help them with. Students also wanted more cross-grade interaction, which will likely improve school connectedness. Preventive strategies can help set up students for success, with mentors acting as a peer bridge to resources at the high school and college, including introductions to staff, the library, writing center, counseling center, and health center, as well as tips for dealing with procrastination and working with specific teachers. To assess the needs of this community, I administered a qualitative survey, which had an 87.5% response rate, which is, I am told, amazing. My research professor is saying yay. Thanks, Heather. Questions asked were, how would you describe the school community? What issues, if any, are you struggling with as a student at this school? Are you experiencing other challenges in your life outside of school? Are you open to talking with me further? I am very excited to say that 66% said yes, they would be open to talking with me further. This may not come as a surprise to you, but high schoolers being willing to talk to adults, not always a thing that happens. So I feel super honored. I analyzed the qualitative open-ended responses using a grounded theory approach. This required that I avoid preconceived ideas and conclusions, allowing themes to emerge from the data itself, developing codes from the respondents' own words. From the patterns, themes were organized into categories with a specific color, and degrees of intensity were depicted using a range of shades. Darker indicated greater intensity, and lighter, lesser intensity. Time is a common element that impedes data saturation in grounded theory methodology. As an instrument of qualitative research, I benefited from a year-long placement at this school, which provided the opportunity to experience respondents in multiple circumstances, including classes, lunch periods, clubs like Gender and Sexuality Alliance, Bring Change to Mind Mental Health Club, Debate Club, and a connection group I offered. All data revealed by my analysis corroborates with information gathered from these sources. Some quotes from students expressing greater mental health challenges were, stress-induced anvil on my shoulders, never quite feel like I'm able to relax, and very burned out. Responses that showed a sense of ability to impact the stress, so a little less, were my fault for not creating enough time and learning to not get angry at the little stuff. So this is where the students are recognizing that they have influence over their experience. Categories intersected, such as mental health and academic stress, as I mentioned earlier. And here's a quote from that: excessive stress from adjusting to the workload. The next identified category was academic stress. Comments of greater severity included treat school as an enemy I need to vanquish to move on to the next stage of my life. Sounds like a gamer, huh? Packs on a lot of pressure to succeed, does not really offer that much support with things other than tutoring. Less severity and a more internal locus of control where the students had some agency were expressed as struggling with time management, working on it and getting better. I really care about school, and I think I have all the resources I need to succeed. Notice those last two things, how different they are. One says, there's not really much support. Another says, yeah, I have support. The third and final category concerned the school community, which the great majority of students described as exceedingly positive. Amazing community, very welcoming and safe, very tight-knit, one giant family, very accepting and strong, full of resources. Moderate comments were caring, inclusive, most people don't feel left out, funny, comfortable, approachable, less toxic than other high schools in the area. Only a few identified the community with portrayals that weren't positive, distant, undercurrent of competition, few bad apples. I don't know about you, but I wish I could say any one of those things about my high school. As expected, some remarks blended all three categories of mental health, academic stress, and community. Specific comments were within the realms of not having enough time for friends, struggling with school-life balance, such as too much homework, not enough fun, fear of extracurricular activities impacting grades, needing more opportunities to hang out together, and more interactions across grades. One of the most extraordinary statements made by students was related to bullying. Don't miss this. Little to no bullying. Never experienced any bullying or negative behavior, and not accepted insults, rudeness, and bullying. This early college high school is a unique community. A qualitative survey assessed the community's needs to ultimately determine an intervention that would respond directly to what the students said they needed, rather than what adults thought they needed. Over 87% of students responded to the survey, and 66% were open to talking further. Although resources are abundant, teens don't necessarily know what they are or how to use them. Some barriers to access include stigma, lack of knowledge about what's available, fear of asking for help, and fear of talking to adults. An exploration was conducted to determine a holistic intervention to mitigate some of these stressors and address as many needs as possible. One of the approaches that emerged was to work with students to evaluate and re-envision the school's existing peer mentor program to better meet the community's stated needs, to increase school connectedness, improve intergrade interaction, and encourage peers to act as bridges to supports. The greatest diversity appears in the more than 40% of students who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community. Although some folks might not expect that in rural Northern California, I think the anomaly this number demonstrates relates to the safety these students feel in being themselves at this school because of the incredibly supportive staff and peers. In other words, queerness is more common than some may think, even in rural areas. It was crucial that I take time to understand the school, develop relationships, and build trust before presenting ideas. This was done by establishing open and clear lines of communication with students and staff, listening, asking questions, and learning about the already operating systems. In May, next week, I'll be working with a student and faculty member to deliver the first part of the mentor training. Additionally, I will leave recommendations for continuing support, such as creating a community of practice and regular groups to work together through the process. Another suggestion is to ensure consistency of messaging regarding the accessibility and availability of supports. Prioritizing mental health is paramount. This point is critical for high school educators, school district personnel, and administrators and school board members, one happens to be here, to understand, as they are often key gatekeepers for teens' ability to access mental health and well-being supports. Too often, adults make decisions that affect young people without including them in the conversation. I recommend establishing more transparent communication between adults and youth for greater cooperation, fortifying collaboration, improving relationships, and thus school connectedness and belonging. With a dedicated staff, a student body that supports one another, and a desire to improve in areas where it's needed, this school community will only continue to grow stronger. Reinvigorating the Peer Mentor program offers the potential for the continued flourishing of each individual, the teens as a group, the whole school, and the greater community. This early college high school, as you have heard, is an exceptional place with many desirable characteristics, including little to no bullying. Their great successes and continued growth in developing a positive school culture could serve as a model for other schools. Thank you.